Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we are taking another look at Iron Helm, a game designed and illustrated by Jason Glover with additional illustrations by Daniel E. Walthall. So Iron Helm is a game that I've taken a look at a couple times before. We've taken a look at the base game. We've taken a look at the Iron Chest expansion, and it is a game that I've been wanting to get back to the table for some time, and I am super happy that I did. What you are seeing set up now is the demise of Grimly. I had a really bad game this game with Grimly here. Grimly was my character. So Grimly here has a health of 14, energy 10, and an encumbrance value of 9. He can hold up to 9 value of weight of things. He started with 2 rations and 4 gold. For those of you unfamiliar with Iron Helm is a card-based dungeon crawl game where you are taking a character and you are going into the dungeon and trying to find the boss at the end. Energy, health, and rations are 3 resources that this game has that you want to manage as you are traversing through the dungeon. And it's really important to manage those resources wisely to make it to the end. Health is basically your hit points. Energy can be spent to do attacks, and rations, you have to eat rations at certain points during the game or else you will starve and die. Your characters start off with a number of trappings. Those are items that you get at the beginning of the game, and those are also items that you can buy at certain points if you are playing the very light campaign version, going through multiple adventures. And then each character will have a starting skill, and each character will have an ability type that they specialize in. So you have agility, brawn, and mind, and those correspond to different skills. And Grimly here, his starting skill was dash. And basically, I could choose to avoid a card in the dungeon at the cost of maybe some of my energy. And throughout the game, as you kill more monsters, you can trade those monsters in as trophies to gain more skills. And the skills that I gained on this adventure were Sixth Sense, which would help me with my choices in the dungeon, and Martial Arts, which would help me with combat. I kind of tried to focus on combat in this particular adventure, and it did not end up going well. I fought way too much and just got beat down, and finally this fire troll killed me. So I faced off in this short adventure. I faced off against a fishman, an orc warrior, a wolf, a goblin, a flying snake, a wraith, and a fire troll. So I'm going to talk about 3 things that I really love about Iron Helm, and then 1 thing that is on an Iron Helm wish list of mine. I know Jason is working on a new little expansion, so he is returning to the game. The game was supposed to be done, but he has been inspired to make a new little blister pack expansion, and he's going to be adding more dungeon cards to the expansion. And the dungeon card deck is kind of this is the main driving force, the main driving mechanism of this game. And we'll talk about this in a little later. But Iron Helm, I think, is a game that is made so much better by every expansion you add to it. Some games have a pretty good base game, and I think the Iron Helm base game is pretty good. However, when I compare it to something like Rogue Dungeon, I prefer the Rogue Dungeon base game. I think it is a better game without needing the expansion that is available for Rogue Dungeon. However, Iron Helm, a similar game, a similar kind of card-based dungeon crawl, but whereas Rogue Dungeon is a little more luck-based, Iron Helm is a little more decision-based. We'll talk a little bit about that when I get to topic number 2. But Iron Helm, the base game is okay, but the expansions add so much to it, and I love the game once you start adding in the expansions. And you can get a boxed expansion called the Iron Chest, which comes with some booster packs that you can add kind of in a modular fashion. You can add them to your game. Some of them will make the game a little harder. Some of them will add some things that will make the game a little easier. A lot of them will add new characters. So once you start adding in all the expansions, you have a ton of different characters to play as, like Zola and Phaon, Aslar. And I love Jason Glover's character art. It's so good. Eldra, Broswitz, Aura, or Korra, Sortab, Kaelin Orma, Moleklan, Mizlak the Beggar. I want to play the beggar at some point. Skrull or Oslo, this grizzled warrior there. And then, of course, with all the new characters, you will get a whole bunch of new skills. And I have the skills separated into their categories. So we have agility skills such as shadow, archery, conceal, dodge. And then we have the mind skills. So you have the hawking, the life drain, tactics, alchemy, divinity, herbalism, and treasure hunter, and appraise. And then you have the bronze skills, such as the axe master, the dual wielder, the berserker, shield block, parry, and fortitude. And if you choose to level up and take a skill that matches your character's focus, then it only costs 3 points of monster trophies, but you can also go out of your character's focus and spend 5 points of trophies to get one of those other skills. You will also end up with a lot more plots to add to your base game, and plots are little story elements that will add some flavor to your game. You will always deal with one plot in between each floor as you are working down in the dungeon, going from levels 1 down to level 5, looking for the boss. You will draw a plot card. And when each plot card has a little story, usually with a little choice or some kind of pressure luck element. And then each plot card will also have some eyeballs. And I think whenever you find your 10th eyeball, that's when you have found your boss. And so it's good to have as many plots as you can so you can encounter that boss before you get too beat down by the other things in the dungeon. However, one of the expansions, and I'm not sure if I enjoy this expansion or not, or this element of this expansion, and that is the Beasts and Burdens expansion. It adds some very difficult mini bosses to the plot deck. So I think I might actually take these out the next time I play the game, because facing off against these guys can really be detrimental to your character's ability to survive. But you'll end up with more plots to encounter. You'll end up with more enemy variety. All the various enemies that you can encounter. A lot of them come from the base game, but each of the expansions does add 1 or 2 enemies to the deck. You'll end up with a whole heck of a lot more loot. And the loot in this game is really fun. It's very mechanical. It will usually give you a choice of something to do if you want to use that loot. Some of the loot you can use over and over again. Some of the loot is one and done. And there are also enemies. There are also mimics in the loot deck, which is always fun. You will end up with more trappings, and the trappings are the initial items that your characters start with. But these are also items that you can buy in between adventures if you are playing the light campaign mode. So these are all options that you can spend your gold on and things to help augment your character, make your character stronger, and give them more of a chance to survive. You will also end up in one of the expansions, you will end up with some afflictions. And afflictions, I think if your character takes a certain amount of poison damage, you will end up having to deal with one of these afflictions. This is another part of this Beast and Burden expansion, this expansion here, that makes the game quite a bit more difficult. So again, I'm not sure how I feel about this expansion because this game can be pretty difficult already. But if you want more of a challenge and want to deal with some of the things like gold lust or enfeeblement or necrophobia, insomnia, plagued, or gluttony, you might want to add this little module to your games. You have 3 main bosses that come with the base game, and each of the adventure expansions also adds an additional boss that you can face. So the 3 main bosses in the base game are the Lurker, the Lich, and the Naga. And then finally, if you start adding in all the expansions, you will have the ability to hire henchmen. Henchmen you can buy for a certain amount of gold, and they come on your adventure with you. And they have a certain amount of morale, and if their morale ever drops to 0, they're gone, they take off. But the henchmen will help you do certain things while you are in the dungeons. One of the expansions adds in this environments deck, and this is a really cool deck that just adds a twist. It adds a little bit of flavor to each of the dungeons that you go in. So you might go into the Shadow Dungeon, or the Parched Dungeon, the Abandoned Mine, the Death Grotto, the Watch, the Sanctum, the Plateau, the Bogland, or the Frost Glen. And each one of these adds a little twist to the game. This is a great little module if you just want more variety in just a simple small deck of cards. And then finally here, we'll take a look at the artifacts. The artifacts, you can spend a blessing token. So blessing tokens are things that you can gain throughout the game. And at certain points when you draw loot, if you have a blessing token, you can choose to spend that blessing token to draw from the artifacts deck. And this is a more powerful items deck. However, there is also some dragon dung in here. So again, there is a little bit of press your luck element to that artifact deck. And then the other expansions will add more adventures. And the adventures are what you want to add if you want to turn this into a light campaign game. So you can think of the box set as being level 1. And then you can have, there are 3 additional adventures for level 2 and 3 additional adventures for level 3. So at level 2, we have the Warren of Despair. And the Warren of Despair comes with a little information card. It will come with its own boss, its own set of enemies and plots. And you will use those when you choose to go to this level 2, the Warren of Despair. We also have the Galnox Labyrinth. And then each one of these adventure packs also comes with some stuff that you can just mix into your other decks. And then the final level 2 adventure is the Throne of Embers. And then we have our 3 level 3 adventures, and those are the Blackened Burrow here, the level 3, the Crystal Caverns, and then also we have Malicious Refuge. And finally, with the Iron Chest expansion, we got our final level 4 dungeon, which that is the Spire of Zogar, and you will be facing off against Zogar as a boss. And then you have a whole bunch of cool new plots to face off against Zogar and new powerful enemies. So the campaign system is very cool. It's very light. It's quick. You start with your base level dungeon, level 1 dungeon in the base box, and then you progress. You choose to go into whichever level 2 dungeon you want to go into, and then you'll go into a level 3 dungeon, and finally you will go into a level 4 dungeon. I've only made it to level 3 one time. One other quick thing that the Iron Chest expansion adds is this random encounter chart. So as you are going in between dungeon floors, you will have an encounter with something on the random encounter chart, and it just adds a little bit of spice to the game. So if Jason Glover made a game that was stripped away of its theming completely, I think you could call that game This or That and Press Your Luck, because almost all of his games deal with that kind of choice. You have a choice between 2 things, and in between those choices, there is a press your luck element. Sometimes you have a choice between this or that, or you can press your luck. And those are all things that I greatly enjoy about this game. And the base of that choice comes in, and the press your luck comes in this dungeon deck. So this dungeon deck has 16 cards. And there are going to be 8 turns in a dungeon level. And on each one of your turns, you will draw 2 cards. You will choose to flip one over. Then you can either do the top thing of that card, or you can choose to do the bottom thing of the card that you don't know. So do you choose the devil you know or the devil you don't know? If you don't want to get involved in this skirmish here, then you would flip this card over and, oh my God, it is a skirmish, but now you're having to do the level 2 skirmish, which is much worse. Again, so after you would deal with that, you would go on to your next turn and you could choose, okay, let's look at this one first. Okay, an ambush. So doing the number 1 ambush is much greater, much better for you than having to deal with the number 2 ambush. But let's say you were getting low on health or energy and you didn't want to face off against that ambush. You could press your luck and turn this over and, a clearing. Okay. So you pressed your luck and it turned out pretty well, possibly, but you might then have to draw a plot card. And even some of the plot cards will have choices in dire need. Do you defend the pilgrim or keep moving on? And so you have more choices here. Sometimes these plot cards will also have a choice where you can do this or that, or you can roll the dice and leave it up to fate. So again, you have that this, that, or press your luck. And that element is just kind of what drives Iron Helm. And I think it's what drives Jason as a game designer. A lot of the items that you get will give you a choice of what to do or when to use it, and it's very important to choose which thing you want to do when. I had one item that allowed me to draw 2 loot cards every time I had a loot card. I could look at them and then I could choose which one I wanted to encounter, which one I wanted to take. So if you are looking for a dungeon crawl, a light dungeon crawl that has good choices, then I think Iron Helm is a game for you. If you kind of lament some of the bigger, more crunchy dungeon crawls that are just kind of all about chucking dice, and you want something where you can make some informed decisions on how to approach things, look into Iron Helm. And that leads me to topic number 3. And topic number 3 is kind of is playing off of that element of choice. And in my original video for Iron Helm, I called it "No Dungeons for Old Men or Women." And the theming in this game, not only do I love the theming, but the theming is more informed by that focus on choice. And the game's theme, for those of you who don't know, is you are playing as an old adventurer. So this is a game about old, wizened, old, grizzled adventurers who are going on one last quest to get some gold so they can afford to retire. And I think that theming fits really well with that element of choice and being wise about what your characters are doing. Knowing when to say no, knowing when to press their luck, knowing when to say yes, because these are seasoned, wizened, these are wise old adventurers. They are not going to rush into a dungeon willy-nilly. You know, these are not the Leroy Jenkins of the adventuring world. These people, they are thoughtful. And so when you are faced with a choice, it's very important to think about those choices and how the outcome of whichever dungeon room you choose to explore, how that might have the possibility of impacting your old adventurer. And I love that marriage of theming and mechanisms. I'm not sure if Jason was thinking of that while he was designing it. I'm not sure if he was thinking about how a wise old adventurer may approach a dungeon in a different way. And so he decided to use that kind of choice or pressure luck element. But even if he wasn't, it was probably in the back of his mind because I think he's a pretty intelligent game designer. And this kind of marriage of theme, of light theming and mechanisms is something that he does very, very well. And so I just really appreciated that marriage of theme and mechanism on this last play. It just kind of dawned on me like, yeah, these, you want to avoid combat most of the time in this game. However, combat is also the way that you can upgrade your skills. So again, that is another choice. But as an older adventurer, you probably don't want to face off against the fire troll. But as an element of another choice, a lot of the powerful enemies will give you an option that you can spend one of your valuable resources to avoid that combat. So again, it's that element of choice. Now, you didn't know that you might be facing off against the fire troll when you made that choice to face off against a skirmish. So again, that adds a little bit of a pressure luck element. Even when you choose to do something, there is always an element of the unknown in the game, and that makes the game really exciting and fun. Now, I do have one wish list, and that has to do with the campaign rules. There is a really handy little sheet that somebody put together on BGG that compiles all of the various rules and questions that you need to go from level 1 to level 4 to face off against Zogar. But one thing that I think would be super cool is if there was an overland component here. And I just drew this map, really basic map of having the Lonely Troll Inn. And so that's kind of, where you go in between each adventure. And it tells you what you can do in between each adventure when you are at the Lonely Troll Inn. And then you have your level 1, so you could go off to your level 1, and that's the base box quest. You come back to the level, the Lonely Troll Inn, and then you can choose which level 2 adventure to go to. You can go to the throne. Sorry, I scribbled this out really quickly, so I can't really read my own handwriting. I have terrible handwriting. But you have your 3 level 2 adventures that you could travel to. You have your 3 level 3 adventures that you could travel to, and then finally you could travel to Zogar's level 4, the final dungeon there. And maybe if each one of these paths that you could travel had a small deck of 8 or so random encounter cards. So you had a little bit of an overland travel component to this game. You could make this a trifold board that fit within here, kind of like the boards that were used in the Fantasy Flight Silverline games like Condottiere. I think that board folded up would fit into this box and just have a really cool map that Jason could do the art for and have a neat little simple a simple overland component to the game. And again, you would have that element of choice, and each of the choices that you would make, depending on which level 2 dungeon you wanted to go to or which level 3 dungeon you wanted to go to, could give you a different outcome on which encounters you have. And I think that would elevate this game even more. I think this would be an expansion that I would love to see. So I don't know, Jason, make it, or somebody make it. Hit me up. Maybe I could help. I would dedicate some time to writing some adventures or something for something like this. But yeah, I love Iron Helm now. I liked the base game, but with each expansion I added, I loved the game more. And I think it's a pretty fantastic game. It gives a great sense of adventure. It gives a great feeling of peril and of scraping by the skin of your teeth as your old adventurer is just trying to get some gold so they can retire and live out the rest of their lives in quiet solitude. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed taking another look at Iron Helm today, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.